So, welcome to my talk, Gaming Capital, the Ludo-Dividend of Digital Games Research. My name is Rudolf Inderst, and I'm very thankful for your kind invitation and the opportunity to speak here today. Last year, we as scholars, players, students, game designers, game developers, educators, and experts from various disciplines came together in Krems to reflect upon digital games and playing in general. We also had a wonderful dinner, and I mean really splendid. If you do not believe me, just check out the Frog 2022 photo gallery online. By chance, colleagues from Israel were also sitting at the table with us. We ate together, laughed together, and just had a really great time. So, this was a happy bubble of crafters, teachers, and writers alike, just like today. But sometimes it only takes a tiny moment that changes everything. On the morning of October the 7th, and I might remind you that was only 1 week ago, Hamas launched one of the biggest surprise attacks on Israel, in which it fired a barrage of rockets from the Gaza Strip. The security barriers were breached by gunmen, and hundreds of innocent people were murdered in cold blood. So I kindly ask you to observe a moment of silence for the victims of these terrible crimes. Allow me to introduce myself very briefly. I'm in love with digital game studies since my exchange here in Copenhagen back in 2002. My main research areas include political theory and the history of ideas, video essays about game culture and game journalism, plus the history of the field of digital games research itself and science communication as well, because I'm a strong believer in the growth of our beloved field, and people need to know what we're doing in order to push forward our team, #GameStudies. My recent darlings include Diablo 4 and my PhD thesis. Here I try to show that video and computer games can be understood as a continuation and a modification of a larger dystopian thinking and storytelling tradition. Ludification, my ass. Oops. So, hold on, there you go. Yes. So let's begin with a quote from Mia Consolva. She's an American professor of communication studies presently at Concordia University in Montreal. She has authored a number of books and publications on the topic of video games in contemporary society and the culture of gameplay. One of these books is Cheating, Gaining Advantage in Video Games. And here she's introducing the concept of our topic for today. And I quote, "I believe that the concept of gaming capital provides a key way to understand how individuals interact with games, information about games and the game industry and other game players. The term is useful because it suggests a currency that is by necessity dynamic." And it can be said that Mia Consolva thereby has developed the concept of gaming capital to explore the following points. Game players what's this word again? Competencies. What a word. Really. Knowledge and pre-knowledge, as well as dispositions to interact with games, information about games and the game industry, and other game players. But of course, there's also the question why this very concept is relevant to us as game studies scholars and researchers. Let's hear it from Clara Fernandez-Vara. She's a media scholar, a game designer and writer. In 2015, she wrote in her book, Introduction to Game Analysis, which I highly recommend, by the way. As gaming analysts, our gaming capital defines us, so we have to consider how our gaming capital is set up. In our first case for today, we will now take a look at the popular genre of massively multiplayer online role-playing games. Titles such as World of Warcraft, EverQuest 2, and Ultimate Online were not only highly beloved among players back in the early 2000s, but also digital game research, which was becoming increasingly institutionalized at that point of time, discovered a fresh and promising research subject here. Books like Digital Culture, Play and Identity, a World of Warcraft reader edited by Cornelissen and Walker Redberg, or Play Between Worlds, exploring online games culture by T.L. Taylor, she was mentioned this very morning in the keynote, were to be found left and right in the field. So, guilds. When it comes to MMORPG guilds, it is difficult to work out ideal types. Players understand their role in the game very individually, from casual to hardcore. Hardcore, what a terrible word. Guilds are similarly diverse. At one end of the spectrum are the so-called Uber guilds. In these game goals are achieved as quickly, as efficiently as possible. They place a lot of emphasis on visibility and boast about their results. Uber guilds are very exclusive circles that often actively recruit. They have their own headhunters in the game and specifically fill positions that are vacant. Applicants often have to prove themselves first. They have to submit letters of application. They pretty much always have a probe period. So everything is highly professionalized. A lot of playing time is expected, and private life often has to take a backseat. Otherwise, you simply have no business in this guild, and you'll be told that in no uncertain terms. At the other end of the spectrum are the family guilds. Such associations have hardly any barriers to joining. They often have very high membership numbers because people just join and often don't do much after that. Family guilds also are not so much about campaigning. It's more important to have a good time. For example, you spend a lot of time together in the guild house you built for yourself. In the chats, the overlap between real-life topics is quite large. People tell each other how their pets are doing or how their last partnership discussions went. These guilds almost border on a 3D chat room. The developer's intended game content fades into the background sometimes. According to the definition of a social group, guilds are small associations that have a common goal, pursue their goals very intensely, are permanent, and have a certain exclusivity. A guild exists within a circle, and only those who accept the rules can enter the circle. But what does it really mean to being able to enter this very circle? What do we need for it, actually? To Mia Consolva, the development of gaming capital is a central element to serious gameplay. In her conception of this type of capital, Consolva draws on the French researcher and author Pierre Bourdieu. According to Bourdieu, capital represents accumulated labor. It can appear in material or internalized form and has a further characteristic of producing profits as well as reproducing itself or growing. It is also very important to note that according to Bourdieu, capital does not wear out through use, but it increases through use then. It seems like Notorious B.I.G. was right when he told us back in '97, more money, more problems. In its incorporate state, cultural capital refers to cultural abilities, skills, and forms of knowledge which one can acquire through education on one's own responsibility. It can also refer to manners or knowledge of the use of cultural goods and artifacts as well as forms of communication. I think it's easy to see where this applies in gaming media, especially in online role-playing game guilds full of mentors and tutors and almost role model kind of guys. The second aggregate form is the so-called objectified capital. This can appear in the form of cultural goods, which include machines, works of art, and similar objects. Cultural capital, in its objectified state, has a material countervalue and requires economic capital for its acquisition. In relation to video and computer games, it may involve necessary hardware or software to start and keep playing. The last form, then, of cultural capital could be described as an overlapping phenomenon. After all, this third form, institutionalized cultural capital, can manifest itself as so-called symbolic capital. Institutionalization, in this case, means that a lack of personalized body boundness of the incorporate capital can be compensated for. Symbolic capital may well also be understood as prestige, honor, or reputation. Of course, the recognition of symbolic capital presupposes that action is taken on the basis of shared cultural and social patterns or frameworks. All in all, then, the aforementioned types of cultural capital can be found in different degrees of condensation in Consolvo's understanding of gaming capital. Those who happen to know me a little bit better and know my undying love for the method of close playing. What this whole thing might have to do with the concept of gaming capital, we will try to find out in the following. First off, what is close playing? The phrase of close playing is inspired by close reading, an interpretive approach to poetry and fiction that relies on precise details in the text to make an argument about the text's meaning. Similarly, close playing means that you will present a claim about a game's meaning by highlighting details of the game, identifying patterns, and make connections. The creation of the term close playing cannot be traced back to a specific author. However, it is obvious that it's a variation of the term close reading. Literary studies locates the concept of close reading within new criticism. However, caution is called for here because it is not a matter of context hostility with which the latter current is repeatedly associated. Rather, it is a matter of a kind of slow separation of the term close reading from its roots, which is also accompanied by a simultaneous expansion of meaning. In this extended sense, it is a reading with a pronounced focus on medial texture and structures. If one follows the explanation of Wolfgang Hallet, it is an interpretation procedure whose, and I quote, fundamental principle is the text-accurate, detail-oriented reading and analysis of a literary text. The best close playing usually analyzes, after years and years working intensely with this very method, I think, use small slices of gameplay in order to make a broader argument about the game's meaning. For instance, in your research, you can take a look at mechanics such as diegetic, non-diegetic player acts, mise-en-scene, including settings, lighting, and sound. Narrative features like story, plot, character development, dialogue, or micro-narratives. Also representations of race, gender, sexuality, class, disability, nationality, or other social, cultural, and political identities. By the way, this all fits nicely with the idea of vertical slices in game design on a theoretical framework level, where game devs create a portion of a game which acts as a proof of concept for possible stakeholders before they might agree to fund the rest. Reflecting on one's own capital on one's own capital, gaming capital, and exposing it to readers is an essential part of close playing. It shows transparently with which prior knowledge and which core that's this word again. How do you pronounce it then? Ah, you did it. Great. So interactive. The hermeneutic working method of close playing is used. In this way, a higher degree of comprehensibility is created. The disclosure, however, is of course no substitute for a clean thesis statement or a proper discussion of your theoretical framing. For example, in my current research, I intentionally use digital games out of very different time periods on different platforms and genres I almost never have played myself. Given these circumstances, it is only open and fair to explain to my readership and the research community whether I'm close playing from a position of higher, lower, or non-pre-knowledge at all in order to reach my specific goals. According to this understanding, the presentation of playful socialization can thus be seen as an addition in the sense of the Dutch game researcher Sibylle Lames. And I quote here, "It seems to me that reflexivity can be a valuable tool for many areas of game research. It offers a methodological tool that can make play part of our search without us having to give up our observational role as scholars." The disclosure of one's own gaming capital is necessary in my eyes because I normally do not want to approach the research objects in the role of a so-called constructed, naive reader, which Jim Bitsoshi, and I hope I'm not slaughtering his last name, and Joshua Tannenbaum developed in their essay Well-Read Applying Close Reading Techniques to Gameplay Experience as a performative counter-strategy to meet the challenges of an unobjective gaming, whatever that may be. To consistently maintain the construction of a different type of player during long periods of plays is, I think, very problematic. It is not clear what is supposed to distinguish naive players. Is she or he to be understood literally or reading naively or rather as a model reader? Who knows? How long will it take for the critical reader to unconsciously make his way to the reception surface by beginning to interpret it and describe semiotic structures? No one knows, actually. The elaborate and complex construction of performative, naive players can usually not be accomplished to the extent required and with the necessary care. So, back to square one then, and this means reflecting on your own gaming capital and exposing it to readers is an essential part of playing. Also anchored in a close playing is the so-called wide reading. Franz Meyer, the Finnish game researcher, is writing the following words: "Playing games is an essential part of being a scholar in game studies, but it should be combined with a selective and thoughtful use of other sources for information, thus paving the way for co-reading of a variety of other, also non-ludic texts, by means of which the wider historical and cultural context of a literary text can also be grasped." And I have to shorten this a bit. So don't worry, should you have dozed off a bit, and such a light dosing after all is quite a weekend tradition, here I summarize everything again for you so that we can get into the discussion or your questions. Gaming capital can be understood as a reworking of Pierre Bourdieu's cultural capital. According to Bourdieu, cultural capital refers specifically to the cultural knowledge, there's this word again, skills and assets that individuals can acquire to gain the advantage in social reproduction, actually. In digital game studies, Mia Consolva has developed the concept of gaming capital to explore game players', the word again, knowledge and dispositions to interact with games, information about games, and the game industry itself. And finally, gaming capital plays a huge role if you choose to work with a method of close playing and wide reading. And with that, I close the case. Thank you very much for your attention. If you can't get enough of this wonderful topic, you can check out my article Digitale Medien und Methoden in the German Zeitschrift für Medienwissenschaften for free. By the way, here you find my contact details, and the rest is up to you. Thank you very much.